Welcome, everybody. We are going to give this about a minute tops. We have a lot of registrants, so we want to give everybody a minute to roll in here. But I'm going to just kick right into housekeeping and a quick ask. You know what? I'm going to wait like 30 seconds, Carp, because I want more people to get in here. They're rolling in. But just from a housekeeping standpoint, really encourage questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A versus the chat. And now that I've said that, we love it if everybody would put in the chat, here, let me enable it here, where you are and the graduating class, high school graduating class for all your kids, not just your oldest. It's always fun for us to see Dublin. Yep, in there. It's great to see
PA, Laguna Beach, Mass, Bay Area, Texas, Hotlanta, Seattle, Peggy, out in your neck of the woods.
Yep.
Miami, Honolulu, Aloha. We two
Iowa
today. Yeah.
Oh, we got a Wyoming.
Wow, first Wyoming.
We've been trying to get Wyoming. Love it.
That? Amazing.
All right. Well, thank you for that. That's always great for us to see. So we're gonna kick this off pretty quickly just because we've got a lot to cover, and we've got our panel of CAP experts that we're going to talk to in a few minutes. So again, put questions in the Q&A, not the chat, unless we, specify to put it in the chat. And yes, you will be getting a recording, because that's like the most common question we get. So if you get distracted or anything, no worries. You will get the recording either later today, maybe even, Matt, or
I think, yeah, you'll get this afternoon.
Very latest.
Yeah, we'll get the recording out this afternoon, and I'm seeing South Dakota, I'm seeing Montana. So, all right, good stuff. Listen, and we have, 'tis the season, right? Especially for your class of 2024 families, the bullets are flying. We are directly in the thick of it. And as we're going to kind of find out and talk about, and I'm sure you've heard to some extent already, this year, like no other, the most massive changes we've had in decades anyways, in terms of higher education. And so you class 2024 families are the guinea pigs. And I think there's some good things, some bad things, but certainly some opportunities. Our job is to make sure that you are educated and you understand what you can control, what you cannot control, and how do you take all these crazy changes and just kind of this system at large and use it to your advantage. How do you avoid a lot of these mistakes that families make traditionally that are really easy to make? Okay. So that's what we do. My name's Matt Carpenter. I'm here in the Halloween capital of the world in Salem, Massachusetts. The place is buzzing. But I've been doing this. Class 2024 is the 19th year that I've been guiding families through this process. So I've been on the front lines here for thousands of times over. So I can very much empathize with what you all are going through, and I understand what's at stake. I understand the magnitude, and something that we say internally every day is, no kidding you're overwhelmed. It's your money and it's your kids, right? These are two huge triggers, I think, right? And so again, we get it, and our hope is to have you all benefit from our experience and from our education. And obviously, me and Peggy, we don't usually like sharing the stage, but we got a team of experts that's so good here that we owe it to the world. We owe it to all you guys. So we're going to cover the first half of this, going over some X's and O's to get you all comfortable, and then bring on this awesome team of experts that we have, and hopefully get all your questions answered. And then stick around to the very end. We have some kind of today only specials that only our live guests will benefit from. So make sure you do not leave before the end here. But Peggy, fairy godmother, financial aid out there in Seattle, get us going.
All right, so let me share my screen here. All right. So in case you're not familiar with us, we are College Aid Pro, and this truly is our mission. What's up on the slide here? We are very intentional about it, to end the student debt crisis by empowering families, by empowering all of you to shop smarter for college. And a big way we do it, like Matt just said, is getting you educated. If you understand how this all works and then you understand where you fit, you are so far ahead of the game, and it will cut down on stress. It'll help you talk with your kids about affordability and set expectations. It's just huge. And by the way, I have twins. I've been through this, so I get it. I get it. A lot of deep breaths, but you'll get through it. And it just doesn't have to be as stressful as it is for most families. So here we are. So with that in mind about getting educated and being, understanding where you fit, everyone received an email encouraging you to set up your free account. So go ahead. If you haven't done it, it's okay. You see the link on this slide. Matt will put it in the chat. But we strongly encourage you to do that. If you have, that's awesome. Hopefully you have it open over on the side. So when we're educating you about a student aid index, you're going to be able to look at yours. So it'll be super powerful. We're going to be looking at a sample family, but then you can look at your family and learn as we're going through it. And a huge thing is you'll be able to see if you're eligible for need-based aid, because I'm sure a lot of you are sitting here saying, I heard from friends and family, I shouldn't do this, I'm not eligible for this, yada, yada. This will really help you see in a way that's factual, and friends and family are lovely, but not always the best source of information in this process. So go ahead, make sure you have that set up. Just get started for free. You'll onboard a few questions, and then you can put up to 3 schools. So you'll put in one, and then you can put in your other 2. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So as Matt said, we just want to give you high level, how does all this work? Because if you don't understand that, then you don't understand your situation. So a big takeaway here is the cost of college, as we all know, has been going up for decades. We have no control over that. But the key thing to understand is all these colleges are on sale. They're all discounting. It's just a matter of how they discount. And that's what you need to know for your family. So there's 3 different ways that the cost of attendance, that sticker price, tuition and fees, room and board, books, travel, personal expenses can go down. The first bucket is need-based grants. So as the name hints, this is money either from the state, the federal government, but most of it comes from the colleges from their endowment funds. And you have to have financial need. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. How do you know? If you've set up your account, you're going to be able to see that very clearly. So that's the first bucket. Second bucket in the middle are merit-based scholarships. So this is the flip side. This is not based on your finances, your assets, and your income. Based on your child and their grades and test scores and talents, music, sports, whatever it happens to be. The college, again, is giving their endowment money because they want that student, and they're lowering that sticker price. And then the third bucket we call self-help. So that's loans and work study. So it's a part of a lot of families' college funding strategies, and that's fine. Manageable amount of debt and work study, your child's going to work. So that's not the free stuff. So you want to maximize the first 2 buckets. And if that third bucket is part of it, so be it. That's fine. So that's how that works. So how do you know if you're eligible for need-based aid? How do the colleges figure that out? Very simple equation up here. Cost of attendance minus something called a student aid index is your need. So if you have older kids, or if you've been reading about this over the last few years, you might have seen the term expected family contribution, EFC. Think of this as a replacement for EFC. Some of the calculations and the way that it's going to be figured out have changed. And Matt's going to talk about that in a few minutes, but it's in this equation the same way. COA minus the SAI gives you the need. So cost of attendance of $80,000, you have an SAI of $100,000, you don't have any need, but 80,000 cost of attendance, 40,000 SAI, you have 40,000 of need. Doesn't mean the college is going to swoop in and give you $40,000, but at least you know where you are with different schools, and it is dependent on the schools. So how is this SAI calculated? There's 2 main parts. There's assets and there's income. So let's talk about the assets first. the key takeaway here is that all of your assets are on the table except for your retirement account. So if you've been a great saver, I'm a financial planner by background, so I love it. 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, Roth IRAs, those are all retirement accounts. Those balances are not included when they calculate your SAI. Everything else is on the table. So that includes stocks and bonds, checking and savings, CDs you own, 529s that you own. So if you as a parent own a 529 and your child's a beneficiary, which is the typical way it's done within a family, that's an asset of yours as the parent. That's a big thing to jot down because parent assets are assessed at a much lower rate in this calculation than student assets. Student assets are 20 or 25%, parent is up to 5.64. So make sure you put that in the right bucket when you're submitting financial aid forms. When it comes to 529s, if anybody else owns the 529, very typical that a grandparent will own a 529 with the student as a beneficiary. That is not an asset of yours, and it does not go on the FAFSA, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. That's the main federal financial aid form that almost all colleges use exclusively. So don't make that mistake if it's not yours. If you're divorced and a non-custodial parent has the 529 as the owner, doesn't go on. And we'll touch on that in a little bit. Jointly owned accounts with you and your child, that can be an asset of yours. If your child owns an UGMA or an UTMA, if that means nothing to you, forget about it. But if it means something to you, that's an asset of your child's, not yours. And there are strategies to put it in your name, but you really should get some one-on-one professional help because there's tax ramifications. There's a lot of things to look at. The other piece here is real estate. So the primary home you live in is not included on the FAFSA. It is on a second form that I'll talk about in a few minutes. But the main thing with these forms is you want to be honest and you don't want to overshare, and you also don't want to overestimate things. So when it comes to the value of your home, you want to find the lowest defensible value for your home. You know, don't lie, but the lowest defensible value. And then as it says on the slide here, there's something called an IRS quick sale value. And we all know when you sell a home, you don't walk away with all the proceeds. So you can take off that 15, 20%, and that could be the market value of your home. These assets are assessed on the day you hit submit. So if the market's tumbling and you've got a nice stock portfolio, you know, you can wait, look at close of business, and that can be the number. So it's real time. So if there is any planning with assets and money to be spent, you have some time to do it before you submit the forms. So that's the asset piece. Now let's talk about income. Parental income by far is the biggest driver in this process. And in a lot of ways, it is what it is, right? If it's your adjusted gross income, line 11, like it says here on the slide. But unlike assets that are the real-time value, it's a 2-year look back that we call prior year, PPY for short. So you can see up here the different classes. So if you have a senior, which a lot of you shared you did, when you're doing these forms, it's going to all be about 2022, and then junior, 2023, and so on. So it is what it is. You can't go back and change your income. If your income is different right now, you lost your job, you retired, whatever it happens to be, don't worry. You're going to be able to appeal that, and you absolutely should appeal it. And one of our experts, Mike Kinderman's going to talk about that in a few minutes. So appealing is a real thing, and you're definitely going to want to do that. For students, their income is also put down, but you can see here in the federal methodology, the FAFSA schools, they can make over $9,400 and it's a wash. So for most kids, they're not pulling in $15,000 a year on a job. So it really doesn't move the needle for the FAFSA school. So there's a nice income protection allowance, which the parents also have. It's just not huge, and parents' income is higher, so it lowers it a little bit. So that's the income and the assets. So if you're looking at your account, you know, that's nice, Peg, but my SAIs are kind of high compared to the schools that I've plugged in here. I don't have any need-based eligibility. but I can't or don't want to pay up to over, honestly, $90,000 a year at the most expensive schools. What's the deal for me? And that's going to be the merit scholarships, which I'm going to let Matt take over.
Oof, you know, I love a good segue, Peggy.
Look at that
I
segue,
love
man.
a good
I killed
segue. That was big time.
it.
That was big time. Yeah, listen, now Peggy, you spent a fair amount of time and I think threaded the needle between really explaining how need-based financial aid works. But we got to go through this stuff pretty quickly, right? Based on all that we have to cover today. But need-based financial aid, I think, it deserves more time because it is more complicated, it's more complex, there's more moving parts. But for some of you, the fact of the matter is there's no magic wand that we can wave, that anybody can wave, that's going to make you eligible for need-based aid. So how do we get discounts? And the headline here is through merit-based scholarships. Okay, well, where's my kid going to get scholarships and how much? And I'm going to go into that in just a second, but there's a couple of things I want to talk about here before I go into the platform, because that's going to be the best place to find out where your kids are going to get merit-based scholarships and exactly how much. But even if we're not going to be eligible for need-based aid, some colleges are still going to require those financial aid applications, the FAFSA and or the CSS profile, if you want to be considered for any type of merit-based scholarships. We always use NYU as an example, really popular school, really expensive school. If you want to be considered for merit, regardless of your financial situation, you have to do the FAFSA and the CSS profile. We're going to hear from our buddy at Mike Hinderman here, who's the director of scholarships at the University of Oklahoma. Their policy, again, just another example here, is if you want to be considered for an appeal, if you want them to even look at it, you have to do the FAFSA. So again, as this list of schools coming to fruition for you guys, class 2024, you got to be hyper focused on how those schools are conducting business. On that note, there's about 100 colleges where scholarships don't exist, right? There's not one kid walking around one Ivy League campus that's there on a scholarship. There's not one kid at MIT that's there on a scholarship, okay? So again, regardless of how talented, how gifted your student might be, it's important to figure out for these colleges that we're applying to, do scholarships even exist there, right? So again, in my opinion, that's not necessarily common knowledge. And then the last bullet point here is we want to make sure that we're applying to competing colleges. Okay, so as a matter of fact, I met with someone earlier today. They're focused on WPI, which is a great engineering school here in Central Mass, right? Worcester Polytech Institute. And if I have a family, and this was the nature of our conversation, that's hyper-focused to go there, I make them apply to RPI, okay, Rensselaer Polytech Institute, even if they hated RPI. And that was the case for this family. They know they have no intention of going there. That's okay. We're going to use that offer that we're going to get from RPI as leverage when we go back to squeeze some more juice out of WPI. So we want to make sure that we have leverage, as we're finalizing our list of colleges. So Peggy, if I could, let me share my screen quick. And let's go in and kind of look at some actual case studies here. And Peg can share the link for our platform again. And I see that most of you have already set up your accounts, which is awesome. And this is what you're looking at, right? You hear Peg talking about, okay, that SAI, and is it lower than cost of attendance? Does that make us eligible for need-based financial aid? And what you're going to see front and center when you set up your account is your family's SAI. Are you eligible for financial aid? Okay, and to further complicate things, there's actually two different types of SAIs. Most schools in the country use the federal SAI. That's this number here. Okay, FAFSA only schools. But there's still a few hundred schools in the country, and then they tend to be really popular schools that use something called the institutional SAI. And we see a huge range there. The two biggest reasons specifically for this family is that, number one, they own their home. And a lot of schools that use this methodology are considering a home equity to at least some degree. Number two, this is a split household family. Okay, it's a divorced family. And in most of these colleges, we'll be looking at both households. Okay, whereas schools that only use the federal SAI, they are only looking at the family that completes the FAFSA. Okay, now a couple things here. You heard Peg say it more than once. For most families, the sticker price of college is irrelevant. It's misleading. Okay, in terms of figuring out how affordable or not a school is for our family. And this is a great example, right? You see each of these schools, Amherst, BU, NYU, almost identical sticker prices. We're sending the same exact information to each one of these schools, but what we're going to be expected to pay is a huge range. Well, why is that? Well, for example, NYU, they don't meet 100% of need the way that Amherst College does. They look at almost all of your home equity, whereas a school like BU, they meet the very high percentage of need like Amherst, but they're going to look at some of your home equity. So again, this is really more in the weeds and more information than you need to know. But you just got to trust the platform here, because all of that is baked into the algorithm on the back end. That's going to give you a really good idea of what schools are actually going to cost your family. And on that note, throw something else in the chat here. Throw out a college that you guys are talking about at home. Any college, what's the top choice? Where do you want to go early decision? Because we'll look at, how, generous or not generous they are. So I'm seeing USC here. I'm going to assume the University of Southern California. Okay, although very well could be the Gamecocks down there in Columbia. So and right on cue, and I wasn't right on cue, JP. That was pretty ironic. So JP, who just jumped on stage, you're not even supposed to be sharing your screen yet, JP. But this is the former director of financial aid at USC here in the flesh. So interesting timing there. But let's go look at USC. And USC, we see that really expensive sticker price, cost of attendance of $90,000. But based on this family's SAI, we're going to get a discount of around just under $40,000 to bring us down to our net cost. Okay, so again, the takeaway here is we don't care the cost of attendance of colleges. We want to know how generous they are from both a need-based and merit-based standpoint. And another thing that I want to show you here is to make sure that you are taking advantage of this advanced school search, and we'll talk about how to access it before we cut out tonight. Or this afternoon rather, but it allows you to say, hey, go show me schools that are close to my house, that are small schools, that have, whatever you want as a major and any number of filters. But let's say you're not eligible for financial aid. I can just sort based on who's going to give my kid the highest in scholarships, right? And I can just look for schools that way. So again, to me, you're not going to find a more powerful tool that's going to show you where your kid's going to get the highest in merit-based scholarships and exactly how much. If we are eligible for financial aid, you can sort just based on that. Go show me the schools that are most generous in terms of giving need-based financial aid. So again, another great way to figure out just kind of right off the bat, regardless of your family situation, number one, how much are these schools going to cost you? And number two, let me go find some other schools that are really good fits for my kid that are also going to be really generous, whether it's need-based financial aid, merit-based aid, or both.
All right. So it's great because you're actually building a list with affordability in mind instead of building the list of great academic personal fit schools and then saying, oh, are these affordable? And you might come across a scenario where they're not, right? And then that's a hard situation to be in. That's what we're trying to help you avoid. All right, so let's talk about the forms for a few minutes. So I referenced the FAFSA, probably a familiar term for everybody, free application for federal student aid. So most schools in the country only require the FAFSA. This is how you're going to get federal, state, and their endowment money that I talked about at the beginning. So there's a nuance to the FAFSA this year. There's some major changes that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And because of those changes, the form typically goes live. It would have already been live. Typically goes live October 1. This year only, it's going live sometime in December. That's what the Department of Ed is telling us. We don't know the date. The minute we do, you're in our community now. Watch for our emails. We'll let you know, right? So it's nothing to stress about. Just take a deep breath. Everybody's in the same boat, right? And the colleges are figuring out how they're going to admit your kids and give them a financial aid package. It'll all work out. So it's sometime in December. As I said, it's a prior year. So if you have a senior, it's all about 2022. So make sure you have those tax returns all ready to roll. Matt talked about this briefly, but I just want to hit it because it's a big difference between this form and the other form I'm about to talk about. If you are divorced or separated, and separated means you live in separate households, you don't have to be legally separated. Only the custodial parent submits this form with the student. The non-custodial parents assets and income and their information is not submitted to the college. And the definition of the custodial parent is the parent that provided the most financial support if you're looking at the date you're hitting submit on that form and it's a year look back. So this is a different definition than it used to be. So if you have older kids, forget about that. This, I'm not even going to say what it was because there's no point in confusing newer parents. That's the definition. So it still has some gray area. You always want to be honest, like I said, but you can sit down, especially if you're amicable, you can sit down and you don't have to share your income, but you can figure out like who is better for financial aid. And if you're pretty much 50-50 in providing financial support, the person that it's better to submit the form, spend a little more, pay a little more for soccer, whatever it happens to be. And really think about this, because just because you're paying child support doesn't mean that you're providing the most support. The parents need to look at, where does the child live most of the time? I have a mortgage. There's 3 of us in the household. A third of that puts a roof over my kid's head. All of those things are part of providing support. I could go on for 10 or 15 minutes about this. I just want to plant the seed that it's not as cut and dry as you might think. For some families, it is. It's just, it is you and it is what it is. You make more, oh well. But for a lot of families, that might not be the case. So keep that in mind. So you can't do anything as far as going into the FAFSA now, but you can create, and you should, something called an FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID. Your child needs it and you need it. And actually the Department of Ed, if you're married, they recommended that both parents get it. You just go to the website, make sure you're on the right website, because they're going to ask for your birth date and your social security number. They're going to ask for confidential information. You create a security questions, they'll process it, approve you, then you'll be ready to roll when the form comes out. You need to use it to log in to do your part of the form, and you have to submit this form every year for each student. I already answered that question, so I assume others probably have it. Each student has their own FAFSA. So you're not doing one for the family and you're going to do it every year. So keep that information in a safe place. So that's the FAFSA. Oh, and another question.
And Peggy,
when I
we'll
did
try
the
to,
asset, what?
we should try to go in the next 3 minutes to make sure we give our time.
Okay. So real quick, other form is a CSS profile. It is live. And the key difference, and Matt touched on this, 2 key differences, they look at the equity in your primary home, the home you live in, and they also consider, most of them consider both parents. So those are the key differences. You're both going to submit a form privately to College Board, and then the colleges will see it. So you see the URL up here. So that's the second form. Mostly private schools you're going to submit with the FAFSA. So I'll give Matt second here to go over these changes that I referenced.
Yeah, and the takeaway here is that, because we're getting a ton of questions on businesses and divorce separated families, FAFSA, CSS, who's going to require what from each household. The takeaway is that you have to focus on the colleges that you're applying to and look at them all like separate private businesses, and you have to figure out, well, for the colleges we're applying to, how do they do business? Whose information they need? When do they need it? How do they need it? Et cetera, right? So, listen, really quickly, just a few minutes here, and we'll spend some more time with our panel on a couple of these. 5, 6, 7, let's start with the good news. There's going to be more money for families that need it the most, right? We're psyched about that, especially number 5 here. Families that don't have a lot of income, don't have a lot of resources, students that are doing this process on their own, they are going to benefit the most. Okay. So again, the big wins here are for families that are now going to, number 1, be able to complete the process with more ease, given that the FAFSA questions are going way down and there's more resources to help them there. But there's a couple of families that are going to be negatively impacted, or buckets of families. The biggest one being, and we've got a ton of questions around this, if you have more than one kid in college at once, whether that's multiples like Peg. I saw a family that has triplets that's on here. They're no longer, the schools that are FAFSA only schools are no longer giving you a break if you have more than one kid in school at once. So that's going to be a massive, massive challenge for a ton of families. Effectively, the cost of college could double based on your situation. So that stinks, and it's tough to find a silver lining there. I guess if there's any silver lining, not every school is going to follow along with that. The next one, divorced and separated families. Again, Peg hit it. We'll talk about it for more. It's the family that is providing the most financial support that is now going to complete the FAFSA. The last one here, number 4, again, business owners. It used to be that if you had less than 100 employees, you did not have to include anything about your business on the FAFSA. That's gone. Now everybody, even if you're a sole proprietor, is going to have to put the net worth of their business on the FAFSA, which we think is going to be a problem for a ton of people that are going to make mistakes here and step on a landmine that you really don't need to step on. So that's why we want you to be talking to us if you're in any of these buckets, but especially at number 4, in my opinion. And then Peg, you can go to the last slide quick, and then we'll ask our teammates to join us here. But you've heard me say it, you've heard Peg say it, that once you're accepted into a college and you get this initial offer, that's not necessarily a take it or leave it offer. There is a way in which we can go back to schools, and especially, like a lot of you have flagged, hey, we had a weird year in 2022. That was our best year ever. There is a method to that madness, which we'll talk about and not spend as much time as we could there. But just know that it certainly is a thing.
All right, I will stop sharing here. And then why don't we have everybody turn on your videos? All right, you're up first, Garp.
Yeah, so again, kind of as promised here, we wanted to make sure that we shared the stage with a couple different professionals that are in this space that have been doing it forever, different places and coming from a couple different angles that I think is great for you all. And Peg said at the top, guys, ask your questions in Q&A, because it's not just me and Peg that can answer those. It's everybody on here. So again, please fire away with your questions, and we'll do the best we can. I want to start with Ryan Callahan. Now, Ryan's somebody that I've known personally. We've had some type of professional relationship for over a decade now. And Ryan's somebody that's been in this space for most of his career, the vast majority of his career. And I think we first hooked up when he was at Boston College, and then went over to MIT, and is now the director of financial aid at Harvard Medical. So somebody that I think is one of the top experts you're going to find in this space. So we always love having the ability to leverage his brain, and appreciate him sharing a few minutes with us today. And what I'd like you to answer here, Ryan, and talk a little bit about is this last point that I just hit on. You know, for these business owners that again are sole proprietors, don't know much about completing this paperwork, or really how to answer some of these questions about the net worth of their business. I mean, what should they be thinking about as they're getting ready to answer this on the FAFSA, and then also the CSS profile at, you know, schools like you guys?
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. I think when reporting, especially for a sole proprietorship, is don't overthink it, and then certainly don't overvalue it. I think a lot of times parents, in an attempt to be overly honest, might end up overestimating the value. The important thing to note is, especially for a sole proprietorship, right? What's the value of your business? So now let's assume the school doesn't expect you to stop working and sell a business to provide them any funding, right? So if you were to stop doing what you're doing tomorrow, what would be the value of that business, right? In almost all cases for sole proprietorships, at least, it's zero or next to zero. And for any of the larger companies, if you're talking about a partnership, S corp, or full corp, you're going to have business tax returns. And if you're doing a CSS profile school, you're going to be submitting your business tax returns to them. They're going to see the Schedule L balance sheet, and ultimately they're going to come up with a value as well. So you certainly don't want to overvalue it. So do the best you can with it. And the main takeaway is, and again, it's important to note also that every other asset, and again, we'll get into the home equity, someone else will cover that in the distinction there. But for business, you're giving an additional protection because it's your business. It's not like an investment property that you may sell to put your kid through school. There's no expectation that you sell your business to put your child through school. It would defeat the purpose. You wouldn't have funding the next year. So don't overvalue it. Do the best you can with it. Sole proprietorships, imagine if you stopped working tomorrow, what would the value be at that point? And then for any of the larger companies that have their own return, utilize that balance sheet the best you can, because ultimately that's what the school will be looking at.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. Right. And to me, it's like, don't be afraid to put zero and be prepared and welcome a conversation with these colleges. Don't overestimate. Right.
Yep, and that's good advice across the board on the forum. So, okay, I'd like to introduce Josh DeMeo. He is the head of financial aid at MIT. And we've got two big whoppers for you, Josh. But I mean, what Josh, in case you don't know, MIT is one of those schools that requires the CSS profile. So it's super valuable to have him on the team because he's been behind the curtain, if you will, right? He knows how these schools do these things. He knows how they look at different questions. So it's very valuable. So Josh, since you are at a CSS school, why don't you talk about that a little bit? And then if you could get into divorced families or separated, because that's a big difference between the FAFSA schools and the CSS schools and how they look at those families.
Of course, yeah, no problem. Thanks, Peg. So I think in general, schools that are requiring the CSS profile are going to be schools that are doing the most in-depth financial need analysis of all of these schools in terms of the type of financial aid that they offer. And essentially what these schools are saying is that the FAFSA doesn't give quite enough information, and they want a little bit more information in order to be able to make the most accurate determination. And so they ask for the CSS profile, which is a little bit more in depth than the FAFSA, is going to ask a little bit more of you as a family in terms of questions that you need to answer. But in terms specifically of divorced parents, the big change to the FAFSA isn't going to have such an impact at these CSS schools as it does at the FAFSA only schools. So at a school that does FAFSA only, previously they would have only asked for the family that the student lives with, and now they're going to ask for the family that's providing more support. That might mean that the SAI goes up for that student. At a CSS profile school, they would have already been asking for the information from both biological parents, and they're going to continue to do so. So they have, whether they're looking at you as the custodial parent or you as the non-custodial parent, ultimately doesn't really matter, because they're going to look at the combination of the two in order to determine the student's SAI. There is still the possibility to apply for a waiver of one parent if you're going through the process and you really feel like it's impossible to provide the information from one of the two parents. You're going to have to contact the schools directly about that. This team happy to help you with that process. But if you don't go through that waiver process, then ultimately the combination of the two parents is what the school is going to look at to determine your SAI. And that's what they've always been doing in the past. So for a student that's already at school, there should be really very minimal impact the way they're looking at your application this year as opposed to last year. And for an incoming freshman, you should just know that this really is the same process that these schools had for students in prior classes as well.
Yeah, and he makes a great point. It's a planning opportunity, because pre-FAFSA changes, a CSS school could have been more expensive and net cost, because that's all that matters, as you now know. But now it could be flipped, and we're seeing that all the time. So there's definitely some planning opportunities. And as Josh said, that's what we're here for. All of us, all of our experts, to guide you through this process.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, Josh. Yeah, so next up here, we're excited to have Mike Hunsberger as part of our team, who's a relatively recent addition, but he fills a void, and really two voids, but especially one that I think was important that we addressed and probably overdue. We just didn't find the right fit, and that is for any veterans or military families going through this process and some of the unique programs, right, that these families can be eligible for. We just didn't have enough knowledge of as a staff, but we've been really fortunate to add Mike on here, who's been spent a lot of his career in the military, and then is now kind of switched over in his next career, and that's specifically helping families go to college with a niche in these military families, and again the unique kind of questions, challenges, and opportunities that come for those families, as well as I saw a bunch of families on here that whether they were parents or whether they were older students that are dealing with loans currently. right? And wondering, how are we in the best position possible? Should we be thinking about consolidating, and now this is going into repayment, are we in the ideal position or not? So these are two of Mike's sweet spots, but Mike, specifically, if you want to talk about, a couple of tips that some veterans should be thinking about that, you would offer in a couple of minutes, if you could, that'd be helpful.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Like Matt said, Mike Huntsberger, spent 25 years in the Air Force, before retiring in 2021, moved into the financial advising and college space. Just passionate about helping folks. The post 9/11 GI Bill is a great benefit for military and veterans that have it. And so a few things that come with that. A lot of times folks are trying to figure out how they can best use the GI Bill across multiple students. And so you can look at that. There's also yellow ribbon benefits at a lot of schools where they will go above the current limit that the VA pays, and it's kind of a cost share above that between the school and the VA. So there are a lot of options with planning around using your benefits. If you're still on active duty, you may qualify for more need because of some of the tax breaks, and you're getting paid at a lower amount than if you're already separated or retired and your income's increased a lot. So looking across all those different things, it becomes kind of a puzzle to figure out how best to use the great benefit that the GI Bill is.
No, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And again, hopefully, especially folks that are, listening to this, make sure you get on Mike's calendar to have any of your questions answered.
Yeah, and if you are somebody that's got loan consolidation questions, he's your guy as well. So just keep that in mind. So next up here is another Mike. Mike Hinderman. So he is the head of scholarships at University of Oklahoma, which Matt already mentioned. But what I love about your background too, Mike, is he used to, and I don't have the exact title that it was, but he ran like a financial coaching program where he sat down with students and parents, which, being a financial planning nerd, I just love. So he is very well versed at working with families. If you want your child involved in this situation and on meetings, he's been there, done that. So we referenced appeals a couple times, both Matt and myself. So Mike, can you just share about the appeal process, and if there's some tidbits with Oklahoma, feel free to pop that in, but just, how does this all work? Because a lot of parents don't even realize that this is yet another step after they're accepted and get an award package.
Yeah, thanks, Peg. I think the first thing to know is that it is common practice and that universities kind of expect that in a certain sense. The first thing I want to mention, though, is it needs to be led by the student. The university, when they look at that, they can tell if a parent is leading the charge on that. So make sure to have the student leading the charge on the actual appeal process. And Matt referenced this earlier. Make sure to complete the FAFSA. We don't look at any appeals if there's not a FAFSA on file. And that doesn't matter what the appeal is related to. The next thing would be tell your unique situation. We pull in information that we have, the data on the students. So tell your unique story, because that's something we might not be able to pull in. And then be specific. Are you appealing because of you feel like you should get more merit need or more merit aid, or are you appealing for more need? Right, and that's important. And again, having the FAFSA on file for regardless of whichever appeal it is, be specific to that. I think the last thing I would mention that's really important is communicate that that this is your school, right? I want to go to the University of Oklahoma, and finances is what my concern is, right? Not I'm throwing out appeals to all these different schools, but communicate this is the school that I really want to be at. And because of that, finances is something I'm thinking about, and I need to really develop that financial plan. So those would be kind of some key takeaways that I would recommend.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And another thing to keep in mind is, your child's not going to be, they're not going to say, hey, we're not admitting you anymore because you had the audacity to appeal. They're just not going to do that. As Mike said, they have departments to handle this. They have all their algorithms of how much can we give this family, and they'll say yes. They're very slick, right? So they're expecting these, and so don't be shy. We will educate you down the road on what's a good appeal. How do you appeal? Just like everything in life, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And Mike already gave some tidbits on the right way to do it. So thanks, Mike.
Mike, quick clarifying question for you. If you have a scenario, and I guess you can just speak specifically to University of Oklahoma, where let's say, for example, hey, the family in 2022 took a 401k distribution because they had to cover, unforeseen expenses, and they're appealing based on that, which is for most 17 and 18-year-olds kind of above their expertise or understanding. Would you still prefer that the student leads the charge in a scenario like that?
Yes, still student led, but partner with the parent to be able to communicate accurately what that situation is. Because with that communication, we can look back and look at assets and income from the information we have on file, and then determine like, okay, this is probably not their normal picture. So we might want to help support that student a little bit more.
Got it. Yeah, it makes sense. That's helpful for me too, because I'm thinking if you guys might be pretty impressed or surprised or whatever. It might appear that the parents involved getting some information like that from, again, a 17, 18-year-old. But no, that makes a ton of sense for me. Thanks.
Well, yeah, and the key thing to remember, and I'm looking at questions coming in here, is if your situation is different and it's worse, that's a trigger. Worse than that prior year, that's when you want to think about appealing for sure. And it could be a myriad of reasons why it's worse. And I referenced that earlier. So, okay.
JP, thanks for making an appearance, buddy. I know you're in between meetings here. So JP, again, I kind of similar to Mike and Josh and Ryan, we love having the ability, like Peg said, to look behind the curtain and get figure out exactly what's happening in conversations in those rooms at different institutions and different types of institutions across the country. So JP was the director of financial aid at USC for quite some years, spent the better part of his career again in financial aid, has since been again on kind of the other side of the fence. And in his words, and I think why we were a good fit as a team, he thinks he has more of an impact working with families, being an advocate for families. I think has been a big reason why he wanted to get on this side of things. But JP, talk a little bit about this, and about just home equity. The fact that, again, a lot of families don't know that colleges are even considering this at all, and to what degree. And again, anything you want to share from USC or anywhere else, but just kind of talk about how you would advise families to handle this piece of the puzzle.
Certainly. So home equity, that can get tricky. So if your child's going to a college that only uses a FAFSA, we've said earlier that home equity is not asked about on a FAFSA, and that's true. But if you're looking at one of those schools that uses a CSS profile, that CSS profile is definitely going to ask about home equity. Now, those schools that use this CSS profile can use home equity in different ways. Some schools will say, we actually won't look at it even though you reported it to us. Some schools might say, hey, if your income is below a certain threshold, then we won't look at it. But if it's above that threshold, we will look at it. So they could have a hybrid approach. And even if the schools do look at home equity, sometimes they'll say, we will only count it relative to a percentage of your income, maybe like 2 times your income. But there are admittedly some schools that say, we will look at all of your home equity. It'll be all thrown in as part of your assets. So the key is just, in my opinion, is, and we've said earlier, is when you're evaluating anything, whether it's a business or real estate, your home, be aggressive on accurate, but be aggressive on not over evaluating its value. I know we so often have our mindset going, oh, what's Zillow say, or what's Redfin say? No, do a little more research. Let's find what that maybe in a more appropriate value is for the purposes of filling out financial aid forms. But just know that every school does it differently. You don't necessarily need to know how the school looks at it. You know, I'm a big advocate for using the software that College Aid Pro offers for free. It's going to run the calculations for you. So just be smart shoppers when it comes to this stuff. So that's my input.
Yeah, well, and also realize this is an appeal item. I've helped families time and time again where it's like, how are you valuing this? And are you actually putting all of that equity into the equation? No bank will allow that, you know. And then the school says, oh, all right, and you know, we'll help out. So just remember it is an appeal item. If you're majorly undervaluing, they might call your bluff. So it's got to be a reasonable market value that you're starting with to get that equity. So last but not least, girl power, Melissa. So Melissa's a bit of a unicorn because she is a financial expert, but she's also had years and years of experience in counseling and working with students. So she's also a guru on the admission side. So my questions to her, our questions are really focusing more on that piece. So two pieces here. If you could just touch on the ED, because that's early decision, that's a big thing, and just define it in case everybody doesn't know, you know, ED or not ED, and why would it even be a consideration? And then just real quick, you know, the essay and why it's so important, and even with the latest ruling that came out a few months ago, if you could touch on that, that would be great.
All right. So on the ED or early decision situation, you need to understand that there is ED early decision and there's EA early action. Early action is a non-binding way of admissions, but ED is a binding way of admissions. So the thing to understand about that is that the student and the high school counselor have to sign off saying that they understand if they're admitted, that they have to withdraw all applications from every school that they have applied to, and because they have accepted you and you're going to go there. So reasons why you might apply ED is if it is your top choice and if you fit academically in their picture. The other thing to understand is that if you are wanting to look at financial packages and compare packages, you're not going to have that opportunity to do that. So you need to go into this process eyes wide open. You've done your research. You know if you're going to receive any kind of need-based aid, and is it going to work for you, that sort of thing. So you really want to look at all this. So not only is it an academic question, it is a financial question as well. So you need to look at all aspects of that. And then moving over to the essay portion, the essay drives this process. It makes the student become a human in this whole process. They're not a bunch of stats. They're not just their transcripts and test scores and those kinds of things, but it allows them to have that human element to it. And so it's a little bit different than what they write in English. It's more of that journalistic kind of reporting. So what have they experiences they have been through, and how have they utilized that in their life today, or how they learned from that. And one thing to understand is when you are looking at an application, there is not just a single essay. In many cases, there are multiple essays. So making sure that you're looking at all of those essays and getting those done. And some of those essays are optional, but many times those optional essays are tied to money. So those are tied to scholarships. I know I'm actually in Texas, and one of our large universities that most of my students that apply to Texas schools use, they have multiple essays for scholarships that have to be completed. And if those essays are not completed, they are not going to be looked at for that money. So again, yes, these are academic things, but they're all tied to money. So the money is very important in this process, regardless of which side of it you are actually on. If on the admission side, there are so many things that is tied to the money side of this whole part of this whole thing.
Well, thanks, Melissa. Ties those two together.
Well said. Nailed it. Okay, great. Let me let me kind of talk about next steps here, right? And our big thing, right? And I'm sure Peggy will back me up here, is that if we've done our job, you got to do something, right? We've kind of failed you if everybody goes back, to their lives and just, I don't know, puts their head in the sand or whatever. So we want to just make sure that everybody is continuing to follow along with everything that we're providing in the way that's right for them, right? And I think from a high level, I put families in two broad buckets. There's the DIYers, right? There's those of you that are just, you're kind of all over this. You're dialed in, you're paying attention to everything, you're showing up for these webinars all the time. You're totally engaged and you have the time and energy to put towards it and kind of the know-how. But I think all of us, we want to make sure you're working with the best tools. So again, everybody has the free version of the software, and all this stuff is today only, guys. And I'll kind of talk about specifically some of the urgency with our Wake Me packages. But we part of our partnership with the NSHSS, we try to give some really meaningful discounts. So if you're on our software and you just want the full version, you want to put in unlimited schools, you want to be able to access the ability to sort just based on who's going to give you the most financial aid, who's going to give you the most scholarships, who's going to give you the biggest discounts. You can upgrade in the top right corner of your account. As a matter of fact, I'll just show it quickly here. But in the top right corner of your account, you can just hit this. It'll either say talk to an expert or upgrade button. Okay. And then you just put in the coupon code HSS20 and you get 20% off. But before you do that, again, if you are this DIYer type family, that's the bucket that you fit into, I'd firmly recommend you do the Premium Plus Expert for a couple of reasons here. You get full access to the platform, all the bells and whistles for a year, but at any point over the next year, you can book an hour with any one of our experts. So anybody that you heard talk today, you could do next available if you just want to do it around your schedule, or you can go specifically and say, I want to meet with Josh. I want to meet with Mike. I want to meet with Melissa, whomever that happens to be. And you're not going to regret that, guys. Nobody's ever done this and said, hey, I didn't get my hours worth, right? Especially if you're looking at some of the colleges from some of these folks that either work at currently or have worked at, probably makes sense to book an hour with them, right? This could be, hey, I want you to look at my CSS profile before I hit submit, or I already hit submit. What should I be doing now? Or a lot of these families that ask their questions about, who should fill out the FAFSA? What are my options here? What's the strategy here? Don't overthink this, guys, right? When you look at this massive investment that is college, don't overthink it. You are going to get a return on this investment, whether it's immediately or you want to save it for the appeals process or figuring out how to pay your bill or whatever. You're going to get your money's worth and some. These are the top experts you're going to find in the world around this stuff. So do that for yourself. Do it for your kid, certainly, that's kind of holding up to their end of the bargain through the admissions process. Make this, I think, relatively small investment here on a financial piece. Now, for some families, and again, this from a price point, this isn't for everybody, but for some families, we have a more comprehensive service we call Wake Me Up When It's Over, essentially. And this is for families that, we just don't have time to dedicate towards this. We know what's at stake here. And I just want a professional to take over from now until my kid moves into the dorm to make sure that I don't screw this up, or make sure that I'm qualifying for the biggest discounts, and make sure that I'm applying to competing schools. And I'll talk about what this looks like a little bit here. And we have 3 basic packages. And Peg, if you haven't already, if you can share the landing page there. But for some folks that just want comprehensive financial aid help, what that includes is we'll help finalize your list of colleges, make sure that you have leverage. We do the FAFSAs for you. We do the CSS profiles for you. We do the non-custodial profiles for you. We do the institutional applications. We're like having a great CPA, right? We worry about who needs what, where, when, and especially how, so that we're qualifying for the max discounts. And then when you get these offers back from these colleges, that's when we work with you to make sure that we're nailing that appeal process. And the great thing about these packages, you're not just working with whoever you're working with one-on-one, but we get to leverage one another, right? I get to call on JP or Ryan or Josh or Mike or whoever to say, hey, here's the situation I have for a client. how do I go back and get more money at these colleges? And then finally, when it comes time to paying for the bill, we're helping you figure that out. Which loan should you take? When should we use what resources? Okay. So it's a big investment, obviously, but again, you have $500 off if you buy by the end of today. The reason why we have urgency with these particular packages is that we're essentially almost closed for the season. We will close at some point in October, probably pretty soon. So if this is something you're even thinking about, there is some urgency, just because obviously we can only take on so many families in this comprehensive capacity. And the other package we have here is dedicated just towards admission. So you get one-on-one time with an admissions expert to make sure, again, we're nailing our essays, we're nailing our Common App, we're nailing our supplements, basically holding your kids accountable and making sure we're doing that the right way. And then again, finally, we have what we call a combo package, which is financial aid and admissions. And basically you're working with two experts at once, again, to make sure that we're nailing both of them, the financial piece and the admissions piece. Again, big investment, but you're going to see a return on it. And again, $500 off with the coupon code. What did I miss, Peg?
Yeah, I would just reiterate, this has always been my thing, and I've been doing this for over a decade, is just keep the ball rolling in whatever way works for you. If that's, I want to leverage your free resources right now, great. If it's get into the premium, and like Matt said, I'm a DIYer, I love this stuff, I'm going to dig and play around for hours, great. Most people, it's kind of a no-brainer to book the hour because you get it. You don't pay the 120 or the 149. It's kind of getting thrown in, and they go together. Most families need some guidance along the way, and it doesn't expire, like Matt said. So you can jump in there. But I see the Wake Me When It's Over. People know, they're like, I get it. This is a lot, and I just don't want to deal with it. I want somebody to hold our hand and kind of own it. We have to do our part. So it's just wherever you fall, but please keep the ball rolling in some capacity. You're going to get more invites. We're going to start doing webinars about how do you do the CSS profile. We're going to walk you through that. So stay engaged. It's going to mean a lot for your sanity and your relationship with your child. And if you have a senior, this is the last year, you're going to be waving goodbye at that dorm soon. This is a major process, and it's a big investment. I don't care what school you're looking at. We're talking about big bucks. So just stay engaged. You'll be happy that you did. And we're here to support you. We know the journey you're on, and we're here.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I want to thank our team of experts for staying a couple minutes past, guys, really appreciate it. And again, anybody that resonated with you, or whether they're in an institution or you just feel like the personality meshes with yours, you can pick them from the drop down, or even right from our website through the experts section. So just take advantage of that, right? And again, do it today, and whether you use it right away or 6 months from now, you will thank yourself. If you're not happy with the decision, come bring that to me personally, and I will figure out how to get that right. But I am.
Yeah, we very intentionally have chosen all of our experts from all over the country to be a part of the CAP team, and we take it very seriously. So I go to bed and I'm very happy with our team of experts. So.
And apologies, guys, we couldn't get to every question. We had just about over 300 questions. We got to almost half of them, but just unfortunately, time constraints. So again, you know where to find us for any follow-ups, and even if you don't decide to do anything today, whether that's book an hour or do our full service Wake Me Up When It's Over program, we're not going anywhere. We'll be out here next week and weeks after, continuing to educate everybody. So you know where to find us now, hopefully. All right, I think that's it for me. But again, thanks College A Pro team, and good luck to everybody, and we got you. Whatever your questions are, we got you.
All right, have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.